Everybody, welcome to episode 168 of Fight Chat Friday. So from the intro, you can see we have a cracking fight lined up. We already seen part one of this saga at the Euros this year, and we actually covered that as well as one of our first fights that we did with the statistics. So today's episode is actually going to be a little bit of a comparison as well, where we have for the first time been able to go back and forth between two fights with the same fighters and how they stacked up in two different occasions. So we have the World Championships here, minus 69 final with Timmy Boss from Italy and James Tuite from Ireland.
So yeah, we jump straight into that, and straight away everybody has expectations because this fight has been done before this year already, and the guys had an absolute barn burner of a match in the Euros, so really expecting the same kind of thing again from both.
Yeah, and straight off the bat we see Timmy coming out with a little bit of intent behind that blitz, and that is something that we've seen from the first fight where he was getting some success with that, but James was picking him off a little bit. But here he seems to be a bit more aggressive and going really through route one, not like going through the distances as slowly. He's just going route one straight through.
Yeah, and straight away there's a little momentum. So, there's been a good scoring opportunity, and then straight away from the restart he's gone back to increase the pressure, which obviously straight away is going to rattle James a little bit, increase that psychological pressure, and call on him to create an answer. So as he's coming back into the ring here, this is a good time to take that breath, have a quick think, because you've had three exchanges that haven't gone your way, and it's time to kind of go back in there and figure out, okay, what am I going to do? What's important now? And what should I do? So obviously, we're thinking from here, we definitely want to take a little bit more space, create a little pressure, push in there, and you really want to find an answer to the first intention shot that Timmy is throwing. I mean, something to deal with this leg, something to deal with Timmy having control of the entry distance to hands.
Yeah, we can see that James is trying to create distance to increase the space between them to use the legs to stop him getting the hands. But Timmy's putting so much pressure on the front foot that he doesn't have that space behind him. And then that's what happens there. As we see, he just runs out of space. He doesn't have any space to get any kicks off that are going to create some distance with the legs to be able to negate his blitz. And Timmy is just burning right through him here with that blitz as well. It's very, very, very hard to stop, especially on the back foot, and especially when you don't have space behind you.
Yeah, and we're into that third warning already quite early in the match. So, with the, what's that, a minute 40 gone. So it's quite early to see that. But I think what you've covered is dead right. It's that, James is forced into that last mat decision a little bit too frequently. You can see where he's had a bit more space there. He's actually able to find room for the defensive side kick. But with the warning position he's already in, you don't want to be getting the majority of your scores like that when you're, trading or exiting on top of it as well. So he would definitely like to be making those defensive shots a little bit closer to the center of the ring, where he gets that opportunity to then break, make those nice angles that he's so capable of, and cut the distance, make a short angle, reverse position.
Yeah, see, the thing as well is James, his style of kicking, it's a little bit of a shorter leg, a little bit more of a bent leg, let's say. He doesn't have that real direct long leg, which also then impacts the distance that Timothy is going into as a result. But he's using the front leg really well to push back and create space here, and that's kind of what we need to see more of, but then not giving up that space like we said earlier. So that was a big factor, obviously, and Timothy knows that. He's trying to get him on the back foot, pick his moments correctly, and when he gets momentum and some drive behind his blitz, he's just driving James completely out of the ring. As well, we do see as well, Adrian, so far that like Timothy, we'll see it in the stats, is actually doing really, really well at being last in contact, and that's a big factor. He's not just giving up, he's getting to that first entry shot. James also is getting to the first entry shot quite often, but Timothy is really maximising on the last out of contact moments.
Yeah, I have to say this match has become more a story of what Timothy has done well. It's not talking about things that James is doing poorly. It's actually things that Timothy is doing very, very well. And for me, that building of momentum, the willingness to go and not give up the space again, but to stand in and take the risk to be in that close distance again and again and again on all of the restarts, is creating a ever increasing pressure on James to do exactly the right thing every single time from every restart. And let's not get it wrong, it is a risk from Timothy, because James is super dangerous off that front leg. If you push in too close on that restart, and we saw that at the Europeans, Timmy was having hacks kicks flash past his face, and that every now and again a long side kick on the hip, a little bit like that. from the restart and getting caught being a little too close or a little bit on the wrong distance. So, he's decided to double down and really pressure that distance on each of the restarts here. And I think, it's been very, very effective for him.
Yeah, I think Timmy just didn't give James any time or space. Like, James is probably the most dangerous fighter in ITF if you give him space and time. He picks off those shots incredibly well, best in the business, I think. So Timmy knows that. He's fought him before, so he gave him no space, completely doubled down on the pressure. Like, James didn't have any space or any moment to breathe or settle. And yeah, as you said, that is easier said than done. It takes some cojones on the part of Timothy as well to be able to
Oh,
execute
absolutely.
that.
Well, it's also like this. It's going back to your old phrase of like, and this is a puncher versus a front leg battle. Really, I mean, Timmy is throwing kicks, but it is really the question is, can he get a greater return on his hands than James can get in his legs? And of course, each time he's breaking through, maybe he's getting one score. Very, very fortunate if he gets two scores off the hands. And James only needs to get lucky once. And I mean, lucky is the wrong way to put it. He needs to have his skill develop and mature once in that, he finds the range on a headshot. One blindside hacks, or sorry, one hacks, one turning kick to the head. And really, really quickly, this match changes its tone. Because Timmy could get 2 and 3 points ahead, and all of a sudden, one kick, and it's leveled again. And this has been the pattern previously, would say, where in the previous match, James was able to get that one head kick and that, turning kick to the body or whatever it was to bring back scores. So even if he was conceding scores, he was scoring higher value scores in return.
Yeah, and like, it actually goes back to the episode we did last week as well, where we talked about a lot of things that we've packaged throughout these analysis of fights. And one of those things was the triple threat. And like, every time Timmy got the hands, he was essentially getting a 1.3 score most of the time, because he was getting that warning and ring position every time as well. So then he was setting himself up for the next blitz and the next entry with hands again for another 1.3. And then point threes add up pretty quickly for the warnings. We see James, I think he had a warning score of 9, I think, which, that's 3 points, and that's that one head kick essentially that he has banked then because of that extra work.
Yeah, we'll jump into that one in just a second, but if you have a look at maybe we'll go to the yours ones afterwards, but we'll have a look at the, sorry, I'm into the wrong one. If we have a look at the work rate across this particular fight, we'll see, we can do a quick comparison with the Euros one as well then and see what changed. So really, really interesting in terms of the shots thrown. We can see where the blue lives and where the red lives. And Timmy just has that. It's the hands is the differentiator in terms of the shots used, not in terms of the scoring rate, but in terms of the shots used. This has become very, very much a match where, although there are some side kicks thrown, there are some, turning kicks thrown by Timmy, it's the hands that are getting in to cause that damage. Whereas on James's side, it's in particular that turning kick in this particular match, I think that got a majority of his scored interactions.
Yeah, and like, if you talk about a turning kick versus hands, that's not going to be a good battle for the turning kick person, because it's not really a stopping shot. So if someone's bursting through the hands and you're stopping them with turning kicks, you might get a point, but it's not going to be a stopping shot, which allows the second and third shot. And we see that in a second as well, because Timmy had much more attempted shots in this fight compared to James. It was the opposite way in their first fight. But the reason for that as well is because we see James didn't really have his opportunity to match Timmy with hands, which means Timmy was getting to his hands, and then if he didn't get the warning, he was able to get that finishing shot. So you have to be able to match in the middle after the entry shot. So we see the stats here: contact made 27-19, and the attempted is 50-42, which gives us a percentage contact rate of 54-45, which is quite high, particularly for Timmy. And then that's a very high work rate, especially on Timmy's side, of one action every 4.8 seconds. Essentially, he's working that little bit more, essentially 1 second of a differential there. And then we have the warnings, which is a big, big factor in this one. 16 restarts, and we spoke about that in the last fight that they had, the first fight, sorry, that the restarts was actually a big factor for James, where he was getting a lot of success. And I think Timmy was aware of that in this fight. 16 is a lot of opportunities for him to pick off 1 or 2 headshots there as well. So that was a big factor, but Timmy has his strategy laid out for this one, and he was bombing through right off the restart a lot of the time to not give that space for any head kicks.
Let's compare that one then to the European Championship stats, and you can see straight away a difference. So Timmy has been very consistent in terms of the number of attempts and the contact made. So his rate is fairly consistent. He's working, and his output is, give or take, the same. The warnings almost identical for him as well. Not far off for James in terms of it's the 11 warnings, but only 11 restarts in this one, so a little bit less. But a huge difference there in terms of the number of shots attempted from James. 70 shots attempted compared to just less than 50 in the World Championships one. So it brings their contacts to level at the European Championships, and James just getting the better in terms of the value on those contacts. So really quite an interesting comparison between the stats.
Yeah, it was way more action, one action every 3.43 seconds for James in that fight. So you can see he was way more active. And the more shots you throw, there's, especially with those haxes and those long side kicks, there's more chance one of them is going to land. You're not going to land every single one of them. You're going to have to throw a lot to just be even close with a few of them. That last line there is incorrect. Obviously, we have one shot for every that Italy attempted, so just swap those countries around, but you get the idea. Basically it's 1.43, and on this fight from the Worlds it was 1.2, so Timmy was ahead 1.2 to one shot, so there's a bit of a differential there. We can just see the overall output from James wasn't as high. Timmy was a bit more consistent over both fights.
Yeah, so here we have just the end of game state, and we can see that, you know, in terms of the average flag score, and when we take the warnings out of it, 6.75 on average across the 4 flags for Timothy, with 1.25 for James. We can see that it gets significantly closer when you take the warnings out of play. The safety margin for Timothy quite strong, 5.5 differential there, 3.5 with the warnings, bringing it a little bit closer, we'll say if the warnings are left out. And again, a little bit of a differential in terms of preferred techniques. An awful lot more use of the blitz from Timothy, and a lot more effective use of the blitz in this one compared to the European Championship fight, whereas James, probably his most effective technique in this one, the side kick or the turning kick, but the side kick was the differential for him. He threw a lot more than Timmy did in these ones. You want to talk a little bit, Richie, about that last in contact stat as well?
Yeah, that last line there is massive. Like, Timmy was first into contact 13 times, and then he was last out of those contacts 8 times. And when we compare that to James 6-1, it's a massive difference. So we can see that obviously played into the overall output, and that contributes to overall 19 exchanges. So we're not really counting just single shots and stuff here. This is an exchange and a back and forth. So if you're winning 13 of 19 exchanges, you're going to be in a really, really good position, obviously. And then if you're in half of those, you're the last one out of contact most of the time as well. So that's a big factor. Decision flips, we only had one, so that shows us that Timmy dominated the fight in terms of the overall decision from start to finish. It starts at a draw, then it went to Timmy, and it stayed that way the whole way through. And there was only one flag in play at the end of the fight, which means James could not have won in the last dying seconds of this fight. So he wasn't able to pull that back. We have a new visual for this one, the triad of control we always talk about. So the tempo/intensity was definitely in favor of Timothy here. Ring control, obviously he was pushing James out a lot, which also goes in his favor, and he also wins that distance battle because he was able to negate the distance and get through that middle ground to get to his hands really, really well. And we see that was a little bit of a different story in their first fight. So I think he adapted pretty well. In the first fight, it was a bit more 50-50 in terms of the control of intensity and tempo. Ring control, Timmy did control that also. He pushed James towards the edges a little bit more as well in that fight. But James, I think, controlled the distance much more in that first fight, which was a big factor here. As we said, if it's a puncher versus front leg kicker battle, the distance is going to be massive. So whoever controls that is going to have a big say in the overall outcome.
Absolutely. And I think it's very, very interesting when we get to look back at rematches, because, you know, you're controlling some of the variables. The people are still the same. And then we just get to see, well, what do they change? And, you know, every time they get to go back in the ring together, we get to see who adapted, what did we change? And for me, the surprise is almost how much changed in terms of, we'll say, when we track it in terms of the work rate, the number of contacts, when we look at the control in terms of the three variables that we want to control, the triad of control. And then when we look at even like the shot selection and so on, it was a very different fight, almost like it was, two different fighters, because of the different problems and challenges that were brought forward, and particularly obviously in this case by Timmy.
Yeah, well, when two fighters are really, really good and have a similar level of skill, it does come down to that strategic battle and the strategy you have for a particular fight. And obviously, Timmy did his homework from the first fight. He knew where his successes were, and he knew where he needed to avoid making the same mistakes again. And he was able to execute that little bit better. And obviously, that was then what happened as the result. He got the result for this fight because of that. So when it comes down to two high-level guys, it's all about the strategy and how you can bring your biggest strengths to the forefront.
Absolutely. So folks, hopefully you enjoyed that battle and very much as we did. And looking back actually at the previous one, it was good to look back at the previous fight and kind of compare and contrast and see what we could learn from both. Again, if you have a fight that you'd like to see us cover for next week, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And other than that, have a very nice weekend. We'll see you next week.
See you in the next one.